Hello, everyone, and welcome to the weekly Wednesday lunchtime live stream on Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook. I am DDO's community manager, Cordovan, and I've got a guest with me today. Say hello to Steel Star. How you doing? Oh, there you
Hello.
go.
Also, I can't hear you anymore.
Right. Let me fix that. Sorry. But yes, say hello to Steel Star there. I have to use push to talk here today for Discord for some reason. So hopefully I will be more consistent about that. Thank you. And welcome, Steel Star, to the weekly Wednesday lunchtime live stream live from Lamania. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. I still can't hear you directly.
Okay. Yep.
Ooh.
Now you should be able to.
Okay. Yes. Now I can hear you. Great.
Great.
I'm doing well.
It's one of those weeks. This has been 2 weeks in a row now. Last week or the week before, last week we talked a lot about Epic Destinies. We had a lot of information about that. That is actually farther in the future, which is why we did that first. That's actually not hitting until Update 51. However, Update 50 also has a huge number of things in it, and we put a lot of that as of yesterday on the Lamania public preview server. So if you're watching this and you want to check this out live right now, you can. Go over to the DDO forums, download the Lamania client if you don't already have it, get it updated, and you can go check out some of this stuff yourself. Give us feedback as well, because this is really, really a good time to get feedback on a lot of these changes that are coming here. We've already been talking internally, for weeks now, right? But especially last 24, 48 hours related to that feedback. We've been considering a lot of things that we've been reading, and we've been reading a lot, have we not?
Oh, we have, yeah.
So,
Between last Lamania and this one, a lot to talk about.
indeed. So we're going to really just focus on that today for the show. And so if you have not had a chance to go check out these threads, maybe this is an introduction to you. We are going to do our best to kind of explain what's going on. And we'll have lots of time for Q&A as well. There's a lot to talk about. But if you have not seen it, let me go quick drop this into chat. These are the Lamania forums, and you can kind of follow along with us here on some of the various threads that we're going to be going through today. I wanted to start off with a new universal enhancement tree that's going to be coming in Update 50 here, called the Horizon Walker. That name and kind of concept leaked out a little bit earlier this year, I believe it was, right? Or was it even last
Yeah.
fall now? It was a while back that one
we
leaked
might have
out.
we might have started talking about it that far ago, but I think it was mentioned in the producer's letter in January is the first time we talked about it officially.
Yep, that sounds right. Yep, that sounds right. And so we're going to go through the Horizon Walker tree here first. So just a quick note that everything you do see on Lamania is subject to change. We will see some of this change, some of it more than others, because, Update 50 is coming up. But we do have a lot of changes that we've already made in the last 24, 48 hours, and we'll be doing quite a bit more here in the next, let's say, week, I think, in particular, right? So
Yeah.
I'm just dropping the page here up on the screen. All right. So can you tell me a little bit to start off with? What are we thinking in terms of the Horizon Walker? Who is this for? What's it going to do? What makes it special?
So the Horizon Walker in pen and paper, there's sort of two sources we were looking at for this, and one's a prestige class in D&D 3.5, and the other is a ranger path in 5th edition. And kind of looking at those together, the Horizon Walker is an interplanar traveler who specializes in hunting targets between planes. And so looking at that in the context of DDO, the Horizon Walker tree is a tree that focuses on single target bow damage, although it has a little bit of AoE bow damage in there. Dexterity in general, we haven't really had a universal tree focused on dexterity, and with Horizon Walkers being both hunters and generally nimble at moving around terrain, we thought dexterity was a good match for this tree. And avoidance defenses like dodge and corporeality and things like that. That can mean a number of things in Dungeons and Dragons. Usually it means that you leave the material plane or whatever plane you're currently on and enter a different one. In this tree, that sort of means you have access to things like Dimension Door, which lets you return to the start of the quest by stepping through a door, as well as sort of a flavor marker for your dodge and your incorporeality. Ostensibly, when enemies miss you, it is because you have partially phased into another plane.
All right. And, sorry, I've got the mute thing done. So the other piece that I think is maybe a central core concept to think about related to Horizon Walker is the concept of marking a target. It plays really throughout the tree here. So can we talk a little bit about what we mean by marking a target, what it's going to do, how it'll work?
Sure. So the first core in this tree is Mark Target, and that's an active skill that you use on a targeted enemy. And when you use it on a targeted enemy, that enemy becomes marked. You personally can only mark one target at a time, but anybody that has this core can mark a target. And then Horizon Walker has skills that do extra damage or effect to mark targets. And it's not just your mark target. Those effects and extra damage work on any mark target.
All right. And throughout the cores here and such, you'll be getting a lot of opportunity to increase that. I mean, we're already seeing that, in the core with improved marking, greater marking, dauntless marking, and then Dimension Door as the fifth core. Horizon, +2 to all ability scores, range power, double shot, that sort of thing. Maximum many shot charges increased.
With the changes we did a few updates ago, one of the things we can give out in places now is maximum many shot charges. We thought this would be an interesting place to put it. Not a lot of people take core capstones out of universal trees, but we thought that might be an interesting place if somebody did want to take that.
All right. So I guess what else would you like to maybe talk a little about related to Horizon Walker? I mean, we're seeing a lot of what I guess you might call fairly expected bonuses to a tree that's focusing on, DPS, single target DPS, things like that, right? So increased attack and some increased skills. You've got, extra damage.
Right. So there's a couple of interesting and unique things in here beyond just stats. We did want to have a fairly robust kind of stat package in here. One of the things that we feel that bow users lack in terms of building is a very centralized bow DPS tree. So this tree does have a lot of very basic, extra damage with bows against marked targets, things like that. But there's a few unique things in here. In Tier 3, there is a trance for dexterity. We have trances in a number of places in the game, mostly universal trees, but there hasn't been one for dexterity until now. So that can be obtained in this tree.
Yeah, I was just looking at that one. No Step Missed in particular. You'll expend a charge, and you'll get an insight bonus to damage, and the DC of your tactical feats equal to half your dexterity modifier for, up to 2 minutes. On a Vorpal weapon hit, you'll have a chance to restore one charge. Now, that's just any time during combat, essentially, that you're restoring those charges?
So some of our trances are paid for with spell points, but this one's a little more like the Falconry one. Falconry has a limited number of charges, but you have a chance to restore them when you use some of the skills of Falconry. For this one, any weapon user, when you Vorpal, you'll get a charge back.
All right, and we've got a freeze in place up in Tier 4 with Corner the Query. They'll need to make a reflex save, D20 plus your Listen skill, or be immobilized for 12 seconds. On a Vorpal hit, the target will also be stunned with no save. It does not immobilize or stun bosses No big surprise there.
Yeah, so immobilize is kind of new. We've had things similar to it in a few skills in the past, but we didn't really have a pure this keeps the target from moving but doesn't keep them from attacking debuff. So between wanting it for this tree and wanting it for some of the epic destinies, we put some work into making a proper immobilize. When targets are immobilized, they can still attack and they can still rotate. They just can't move from where they are.
All right, yeah, that's pretty interesting, and presumably that's kind of an effect that we could use elsewhere too, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's got a number of uses. I think you'll see it pop up here and there, even possibly in content. Still working out how it works on players, but
Okay, speaking of how does it work, how does scatter shot work? Expend a
right.
charge to randomly select up to 3 different enemies at close range and shoot an arrow at each of them. It's kind of like a more of an AoE. I mean, well, I don't even know how to describe it exactly, other than what we just did. Right? It's a
It's
little
kind
bit of
of
a flavor variant of mini shot almost. Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of a shotgun for bows a little bit.
Yeah.
So I'll kind of dive into the tech of how that works if that's okay. So when you press the button, it does a cone detect in front of you, like a lot of our spells would, and comes back with everything it found in that cone. After that, we kind of take that array that we of everything it found. We throw out anything that's not a valid targetable enemy. So it's never gonna pick breakables. It's never gonna fire at a door. It's just going to find the list of this is an attackable enemy. Then it randomly picks one out of that list, fires an arrow out of it, takes it out of the list, waits about a quarter of a second, which is mostly a performance thing, but it also lines up with the many shot animation, and then does that 2 more times to 2 more different targets, assuming it found at least 3. So when you push the button, what you'll really see is as long as there's at least 3 enemies kind of nearby in front of you, it will fire one arrow randomly at each of those 3. Um, and it works with improved precise shot as well. So if there's enemies behind those enemies, the arrows will keep passing through, hitting other enemies on their way.
What about things like proc effects?
They should work fine. This is a standard ranged attack, shoots 3 times. So if you have proc effects that go off on hit or on crit, they should work exactly as expected.
Cool. Yeah. Banish the query is another one that's maybe a little bit unusual. We're really giving out more force damage. There we go. Scaling with range power. If the creature is extraplanar, it needs to make a saving throw or be banished, presumably per the banish spell.
Yes. So it again, if something's immune to banish for one reason or another, that's not going to work. But this is a similar DC to things like coup de grace. It's the D20 plus a skill. In this case, it's listen. Should be really interesting again in content that has a lot of extraplanar creatures that can be banished.
I have played quite a bit of 5th edition, and one of the things that seems to get used an awful lot in 5th edition is a little thing called Misty Step.
Mm-hmm.
Now we've got Misty Step.
Yeah, at its roots, it's more or less an abundant step, but we added some effects to it. It's something we're still looking at if we want to do anything else interesting with it. But for now, yeah, it's a lot like abundant step, but it's got some cool effects to it.
So ultimately, then it'll do the same kind of target that an abundant step would. Here's your start point. Here's your end point.
Yes.
And it's more kind of like a pop reappear.
Yeah, you disappear, some effects go off, you reappear at your end point.
Does that mean theoretically, like you could use it to get through, say, a jet of fire or something like that?
It doesn't have any defensive or incorporeal bonuses right now, but it potentially could.
Okay. Okay. So normally you would still have to deal with whatever things on the path, do you
Right.
think? Okay.
But that's something we could potentially do with it. It could be really cool for it to, grant a bonus to saves or something while you're in the step. So you could use it to get through things like traps.
Okay. Before we move away from Horizon Walker to some of the other topics of today, I wanted to give Q&A a chance to respond. Anyone in Facebook, YouTube, or Twitch that would like to ask a question about Horizon Walker, now might be a great time to do it. I see one right off the bat. What about sonic damage? I know Titan is a big advocate of sonic damage in our Twitch chat, but sonic damage is one of those things that we're pretty stingy about, frankly.
Yeah, it's something I'd love to give out more. The tough thing is you don't see it terribly often in pen and paper outside of Bard and Bardic related things. A little bit more in 5th edition. It kind of fell in some cases with the other damage types, but I'd love to do a universal tree around sonic damage if we can find the right one.
I like this question from Glassjaws. How do we think this compares in terms of single target damage again versus, say, like something like the Inquisitive that came out, fairly recently?
I would regard this as a little bit lower in some regards. Some of that is, it's very likely that we need to adjust damage a little bit upward just based on some of the feedback we've gotten so far. But I think that some of the builds that would use this tree will be better prepared to use bows based on their other trees than some of the builds that use crossbows with Inquisitive. So it's something we're looking at in terms of overall power. I wouldn't say we're necessarily targeting this tree to be a 1-to-1 damage equivalent with Inquisitive, but it's something to consider.
Sure. With the sort of planar focus of the Horizon Walker, what about an ability that maybe could be used when you're in another plane? This one is kind of a paraphrase from Ben Bradley here. What about basically the capstone providing a special buff to your character while traveling to a specific realm? We don't have the tech for that currently, I don't think, right?
We don't. I mean, so the thing about it is we'd have to assign some specific things in the specific content. So what that would sort of look like on a tech level is we'd have to go in and say, if you have this ability and you're in any of these quests or public spaces, apply this very particular thing. It's the kind of ability we sort of try to avoid sometimes because it is a maintenance task that we will have to keep on top of forever. Anytime we add new content in a plane we haven't been to before, someone has to take on the task of going and making sure Horizon Walker touches it properly. It's feasible, and it's something I could probably discuss with the team. What exactly it looks like, hard to say. But that could be a really cool idea if we can figure out a way to do it that isn't overly difficult to manage long term.
Works for me. All right, unless we have anything else, let's actually move on to the next bit, which is we're also doing some pretty significant changes to some of the endgame itemization. And I know it's a little bit of a scary thing to hear, but that's part of why we're doing it and making these changes and getting this feedback. So let me bring up this next section here, and then we'll talk a little bit about that. Meanwhile, I'm going to basically have you cover some time while I call up the thread by saying, what about Arcane Archer? How's this going to, like, so when, okay, I'm a big ranged build guy right now, let's just say. We have a lot of choices. Historically, Arcane Archer's been one of the better choices. How are we going to fit, like, Horizon Walker into the mix?
Sure. I mean, if you're an Arcane Archer, Horizon Walker is another tree you have as an option for a secondary tree. Just on Ranger on its own, you have Arcane Archer. Tempest isn't really going to do a whole lot for you, and then you have Deepwood Stalker, which is a hybrid melee and range tree. So inevitably, going up Deepwood Stalker, you're going to run into some melee stuff that, if you're purely an archer, you may not actually want or use. So Horizon Walker acts as another tree that you could go into where there might be more stuff you actually find useful to your build. It's just a different way to build an Arcane Archer in that case.
Is it something that potentially, if you weren't fully ranged focused, there's
I have lost you on voice again.
Sorry about that. There's an issue where if I don't have Discord prioritized as like the top window on the screen, my push to talk doesn't work. So
gotcha.
Anyway, that should be solved now here. So I was just going. What was I going to say? I've forgotten it. So let's move on to the endgame itemization adjustment. So, power creep is a term that I've heard a couple of times on the forums over the years, and tends to be a topic of, great interest to people both on the forums and throughout the game. As we focus on the power level of items at the level cap, we're making some adjustments actually to encompass both content difficulty and the itemization itself. And so it's a good time to really talk about this and get some Q&A done on the show here today. So first off, why are we doing this? And then second, what are we doing as a general?
Sure.
Yeah.
So over time, we have been kind of sitting with 30 as the level cap for a long time at this point. And we kind of hit some points where in order to keep new content relevant and desirable, we continued moving the power of new items upward so that players would have access to more and more powerful items that they would want to get in new content. Some of the issue in that is it means that content at the same level, especially as you approach Endgame, doesn't necessarily reflect the difficulty of that content, nor the power of items that you can acquire in that content.
Yeah,
so,
if you kind of think about,
older content in levels 28 to 30 would have weaker items than newer content at the same level. And as a player, that can often make it hard to figure out what order you should play things in, what's relevant in terms of endgame. And it makes it difficult going forward for us to continue to create new things because they just end up stacking on top of each other. And what we'd rather have is an ecosystem where a lot of these items continue to be relevant over time, as well as throughout Epic having monster balance be a lot more similar to the kinds of items at specific levels.
Yeah, if you kind of think about the way, DDO has released content, right? We've got higher level quests that, came out and it's been 4 years, whatever. And as we do newer quests at the same level, right, the level of itemization has not always, it tends to go up and to the right. That's just kind of a natural tendency of how these things work, right? And so, but then when you get back to a position where you've got the newer content and the lower level content at the same level range, essentially, but years apart in terms of that progression track of itemization power, right? You end up with a more disparate place. As we're looking now into the future, level 30 and beyond, is really now the time why it's really important to do this work now.
Right. If we weren't doing something like this, creating content at over level 30, especially as the level cap goes up in the future, the numbers would continue to rise to levels that stop even being meaningful. And again, like in that interim box, 28 to 30 or so, the difficulty would just spike. So a player coming through from level 27 to, let's say, 31 or 32, when we have those levels, would experience a really sharp difficulty spike, more or less out of nowhere, depending on the content they were playing. So this adjustment, both to items and to enemy statting, is going to help create a smoother leveling experience for everybody involved.
All right. So what are we talking about here? Named items found within legendary content will be adjusted and normalized to values appropriate to their minimum level. This means if you found an item in Ravenloft, and you find an item, say, in Sharn, you find an item in Feywild, they're all going to have the same power level here, along with the rest of the current legendary content. So it's going to change some of the item values. Maybe you get plus whatever to a certain thing. It may most likely go down a little bit here. And then we're adjusting the monsters. And that's the other piece here to talk about, maybe right up front, actually. There's this whole other side of it, which is, and then we're balancing the content also to match a more consistent expectation. At least that's the goal.
Right. So if you play around in this preview, already so far we have reduced monster saves by a lot across most, if not all, of epics, as well as a number of other stats. And we're going to be looking into more as we get into further previews and closer to release. We're already talking about uh, addressing the disparity between player attack and monster armor class. In this preview already, we've seen that some players are struggling to hit AC sometimes, and that's something we want to make sure we address because we want uh, content to. We want the change in statting and items and the change in monster statting to work well together so that it feels good.
And that's why we're doing this preview, and we've been making changes throughout the week, really, as we
Oh,
get
I
a
lost your
nice.
voice again.
Sorry, I was just going to say that's why we're doing the preview, and
Right.
that's what we've been doing this week is really responding to that. So having a lot of people looking at this stuff really is useful right now.
Yes, like the feedback we can get from actual play is so important right now. It's already gotten us to a few places that we know we want to make more adjustments, and the more actual play feedback we get while this preview is open, the better.
Indeed. All right. So ideally, if everything falls into place exactly as we want it to be, we are going to probably have to take care of a few outliers while we're at it. But in general, the play experience should be what? Relatively neutral?
Relatively neutral, yeah. There's a few places it probably won't come out that way. And there's some discussions to be had about where Reaper should land in this. There's a lot of discussion of, if overall the numbers are coming down, but Reaper adjustments stay the same, does that mean Reaper is harder? There's a lot of pieces to this, but we're talking through all of them. We're getting good feedback, and for at the very least quests outside of Reaper, yeah, I believe the feel should be about the same.
Okay. Items with crafted components, such as Slaver's Crafting, will have their crafted components adjusted just like these statically set effects found on non-crafted gear. Can you explain that one a little bit more to me?
So that's saying that there are some crafting systems we have, like Slave Lords, that may not have followed the exact progression of named items or can of crafting in terms of the numbers they give out to specific stats, and that's going to be brought in line with the rest of the system. So those kind of outlier crafting systems like Slave Lords will give bonuses similar or identical to what you can find on named items at the same level. So their power will be in versatility and being able to put those numbers where you want them, not a statistical numbers advantage over other items of the same level.
What do we mean by raid items and minor artifacts will retain their proportional power boost to other items at the same level? Does that mean essentially we're still making sure the raid items and minor artifacts are a little bit better than what you're going to get, say, from like Caneth crafting or certainly random loot?
Right. So in this pass, a lot of items of the same min level are going to deliver the same amount of power and the same statistical bonuses to an individual stat. A min level 10 item gives this much strength across the board. The exception to that is going to be raid items and minor artifacts, which will usually have higher bonuses to an individual statistic than their min level would otherwise give on an item.
As part of this, we're doing a thing with Keen as well. Instead, it's going to provide complete fortification bypass. Does that mean, like, even if they have theoretically like 250% on a natural 20, it's just going to bypass it, right?
It should, yeah. It's still something we're playing with, but that's the plan.
And that's going to replace the existing bonus, which does have widen that crit profile. And as we've discussed, I think throughout the year here, really at several points. So that's a little bit of a thing that we're working to take care of long term.
Yeah, I mean the crit bonus on it was either mandatory or it wasn't based on the feats that you had. And even if you did have the feats, the extra W that current Keen provides means that weapons that do have Keen feel absolutely mandatory relative to items that don't. And that's not a good system for anybody. So we're adjusting what Keen does. We're going to keep an eye on it, see how it plays out.
I like also this question about from, I believe, I think it might be Glass Jaws again. What about skills? Okay, so we got the monster changes, we got the item stats, but there's a lot of other kind of skills that are involved in the various checks that are going to be impacted by this, in addition to just general skills and
Sure.
their usage.
I don't think we currently have plans to adjust the DCs in content. It's something we need to talk to the content team a little bit about. They may be comfortable with some of those things getting a little bit harder than they are now. There may be cases where we do need to make adjustments because something was pushing the top line of what was available at the time and is now completely impossible. It's something that we haven't addressed yet, but it's something we're going to be talking to the content team about.
Yeah. All right. So right now, if you've got a, let's say, an item with whatever it has as a bonus, it's going to be changing when we say main stat at level 28, 29, and 30, going to 12, 13, 13. That means on everything except for and mostly raid items.
Sorry, I didn't quite understand the question.
Okay, so sorry, let me repeat that. For the main stat chart that we have on this chart here, for level 28, 29, and 30, it'll be 12, 13, 13. Does that mean, for example, whether the item gives you strength or a bonus to a skill, whatever, the main stat of the item?
I believe what Linabel put that chart together, and I believe what he meant by that was ability scores for main stat.
Okay.
If it's a strength bonus, I forget offhand if they use enhancement or something else for the core one of those, but not insightful, not quality. The main stat, strength or dexterity or whatnot, at level 28, generally you'll see 12 on items. 29 and 30, you'll see 13. That will be slightly higher on raid items and artifacts.
Okay. Excellent. And then 32, 33, 34 for PRR, MRR, physical, magical resistance rating. 139, 142, 146 for spell power. Crits will be 20, 20, 21%. DCs, 556. DC all, that would be a universal DC boost, generally 444. And then a slight increase in double strike at level 29 and 30 as well.
Yeah, that's just a brief look at a couple of stats. I'd advise if you want to know about a specific stat, go in and look at the build, see how it's changed versus the same item on live.
All right. When we talk about the legendary tier system, what is the legendary tier system to start with? Sorry, I was going to say, yep, sorry, I cut out again, huh?
Yeah.
All right. The problem is I normally would use voice activity in Discord, but Discord was causing me problems with voice activity before we went live on the air. So that's what's the source of the technical issue there. I'm asking about the legendary tier system. For those who actually maybe not even are that familiar with the concept of it, what do we mean when we say a legendary tier system as it relates to monsters?
Sure. So in legendary content, so level 30 to 31 and up content, monsters are somewhat tougher. And that's in part because of some buffs that we just across the board give to all monsters in that content. However, in this pass, because of the stats that we're taking down on a lot of equipment, we're able to take a lot of that extra buffing we did to make that content tougher out entirely. In some, I'm not 100% sure that it's completely gone. There may be a few things that are still adjusted, or it may even remain in some form to bring some stats further down than they are by default. But more or less, a lot of stats on monsters and legendary content are going to go down because we're able to take those out. Now that overall power from itemization is going down also.
All right. They're not just losing saving throws. The legendary Tier 2 buff corresponded to 150% fortification bypass, 60 attack bonus, and 10 spell penetration, as well as other offensive and defensive buffs. With that largely being going away as a function, this is going to mean what in terms of the content design side when we're working on statting monsters here in the future?
It means that the stats we assign to monsters are a lot closer to the stats they will actually have. Uh, like we said, this is a blanket tier effect that we apply to all monsters in this content. So if we stat them at a particular number, we've kind of had to mentally understand that that number will be significantly higher than what we listed it at because of the legendary buffs. And we will no longer have to do that, so statting should become a lot more straightforward.
All right. We could, I guess, I'll go into more of this if we feel we
Sure.
need to, but we already kind of talked about content pack parity. We have not really talked about how this impacts Caneth crafting. Caneth crafting largely was at these levels, is that correct?
Through a lot of the game, it is, but again, because of that massive jump as you get between levels 28 and 30 in terms of the power of items, Canvas crafting really dropped off. It stayed kind of even with its normal curve. And so at Endgame, Canvas crafting was a lot less powerful than named items you would find. And with this change, it's going to be a lot closer to the power of named items you can find.
All right. Random loot viability. I'm not sure that a lot of endgame people are still going to be using a lot of random loot, but it is now an option, as it were, for I think more people, especially those who perhaps are not playing on Reaper difficulty and things like that. Right.
Thanks, Cat. This is going great.
No, it's never a bad thing when your cat's on camera. Just never a bad thing. It's always good. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I think we've largely gone over the thread, so let's go into some of the questions here.
Sure.
Let's see. I'm not quite sure what Listen Chart is asking. What about loaded dice weapons? Do you know what that might be referencing?
I think that's referring to weapons that have dice inside the brackets that are expanded beyond, your normal 1d6 or what have you. So something like 1d6 plus 7 on the inside of the brackets. Those are remaining unchanged as far as I know. They should continue to deliver that amount of damage.
Is this impacting minimum level of any of the named loot from that we can think of?
I don't think so offhand. There's a few things that we should probably check with the power adjustment, but as far as I know, all min levels should remain the same.
Can we explain a little bit more about how we're going to balance monsters with these gear changes as it relates to Reaper difficulty?
As I said earlier, Reaper is still something we're talking about. We don't have any plans to change Reaper at this time with regards to these changes, which might result in Reaper being harder than before. It's still something we're talking about. I don't have an exact answer at this time.
It may well be, though, that players have some of our players who are play a lot of Reaper have gotten pretty good at it.
Yeah,
and it may not be a bad thing if that difficulty goes up.
I'm personally generally of the mind that Reaper's a little too easy, but it's something that as a team we're still talking.
Does this impact stat tome bonuses at all?
No, I believe those are remaining exactly the same.
Okay. Well, what's the name of the cat?
Oh, the cat's name is McGee.
Nice. All right, let me pop over to YouTube. So we're losing a lot of numbers on, quote, everything else along with the monsters. What about trap DCs? What about target DCs for bluff, diplomacy, intimidate? If that is not also adjusted down, how are folks going to deal with things like spell penetration?
So two different questions there. Traps we already talked a little bit about earlier. It's something we're going to talk to content about and see if we need to do anything on a blanket level, or if we only need to adjust certain things, or hard to say until we actually talk to content about it. In terms of things like social skills, that's something we're already working on. We're going to be making some adjustments we know about to specific monsters, especially raid bosses, to make sure that they are still able to be intimidated about as well as before. It's going to be a process. We may not hit absolutely everything right away, but the more feedback we get from Lamania about specific things that we can do to make sure that those skills are still viable, the faster and better we can do something about it.
All right. Got to back up again. Let me get Facebook chat. Kind of off-topic question while I'm hunting through Facebook chat. Can we ever get dragon scale shields?
Ooh, that would be really cool.
Yeah.
That would be really cool. Possibly. We'd have to talk to Art. I think that, if we do another sort of dragon-themed content pack at some point, it would be a really good time to do it.
I'm not really seeing a lot of questions related to that.
Okay.
All right, so let's move on.
Right.
What else should we talk about a little bit? I know that you were not as directly involved in the scroll seal shard work.
Right. Yeah, that was largely Linabelle.
Yeah. But we can say that there is quite a bit of scroll seal shard work going on here, and we do have a thread about that as well. How much were you involved in the original scroll seal shard work back in the day?
That's earlier than me. I mean, I joined the team in 2010, and we were still putting out the occasional content pack that had it. Red Fens was released after I started with the team. What's the name of the pack? Lords of Dust pack was after I arrived, but a lot of it was already there in the old Epic system at the time I started. So not very much.
Yep. As such, I don't know that it's really all that valuable. To go through the thread here again. Maybe we'll focus on that elsewhere, or perhaps even next week. A little bit more about the scroll seal shard system.
Yeah.
We've got some time left to do general Q&A and about 10
sure.
minutes left, so let's look at some stuff. We're on Lamania here, as you can see, and let's try to show off a couple of cool pieces of loot. You got anything in particular you want to nominate first?
Ooh. If you've got an artificer and want to show off that cool new rune arm, this would be a good time to do that.
I do, yes.
We
we have a rune arm that is a little bit different than any other rune arm I think that we've ever put in the game. I did also get this character, I think, equipped with one of the new pieces of armor and a helmet as well. I think both that helmet and that armor is new. I'll check it in a second. But yeah, so the helmet is the legendary Plume d'Entrant. D'Entranti.
That sounds right.
Yep, that sounds right. And that gives you a charisma, deception, and seeker along with green, yellow, augment slot, and the legendary Saltmarsh Explorer. This is going to be probably a thing that we could talk a little bit about. Our new the Saltmarsh set is going to be what? PRR, MRR, melee, ranged, universal. All ability scores, artifact bonus, positive, negative, repair amp. That doesn't sound tiny.
Kind of a generalist boat, but it's a lot. So
the armor is the Privateer's Brigandine, and that's 146% fort, 34 magical sheltering, 30 spell resistance, spell saves 11. And I'll turn around this character and kind of take a look at it. So. Or I will try to turn this character around. Yeah, there we go. All right, so now let's get to this rune arm. Unfortunately, I don't have my admin client to detach the camera, but you can kind of see here. Let me make sure it's on camera. It is. You can see the squid. Sir Squilliam the Third.
I think I've lost your voice again.
Yep, Sir Squilliam the Third Esquire.
Yeah.
And this is a mid-level 5 rune arm, so presumably this is the heroic reward.
Yes.
I happen to have it on a higher level character, but at min-level 5, you'll get 13 natural armor bonus, some cold resist, 29 spell resistance, and then crushing wave. It'll occasionally crush enemies beneath a torrent of frigid water. Otherwise, it does untyped damage. A tidal shot, sort of meant to be water damage, essentially, right?
Yeah, salt water specifically. So it's using the
Yeah.
salt shot.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there you go.
I believe that the squid on the arm is going to animate, and I think that's not in yet. But I think it's going to move.
Yeah. All right. There we go. And I'm just going to try to call up the rune arm.
Yeah.
But I don't think we have. Yeah, I don't think we have the shot effects 100% yet. Is this right? I don't think this is.
Yeah,
right.
that's right. That's
Okay.
salt shot is an existing rune arm shot effect, if I'm not mistaken. So.
So it's just the animation on the
yeah, I think
so.
the squid itself and the tentacles are going to move.
All right. Well, let's just take a look at some of the other named items here. The holder of newer loot. Well, legendary, right?
Yeah.
So what else? What have I guess? How much of this did you personally work on? Anything you want to talk about?
None of it whatsoever.
All right.
I've had my head in Horizon Walker and then getting the Epic Destiny stuff together.
Yeah, sure. We do have a
lot of this is new to me.
Yeah, we have a neat trinket. This is Good Luck 5, Spell Absorption, Intelligence 14, Improved Deception as well. Also one of the Saltmarsh Explorer sets. It's a trinket. It's a two-headed platinum piece, ideal for a cheap trick or to win a cheaper bet.
And it's a minor artifact, so you can level it up.
Sapphire Spyglass. The Spyglass has a lens of pure sapphire and gets you dexterity. Eversight, which is true seeing and immunity to blindness. Is that new? I don't know if I remember Eversight before.
That might be. It might have been used in Feywild. I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah. Okay. Ring of the Kraken. This is a Charisma Ring, Null Magic Guard, and it has a each time you're hit in melee combat, there's a chance the energy of the blow will be converted into spell points. Presumably, not too many, but there you go. And we finally get a pocket watch.
Yeah.
Intelligence, linguistics, diversion, vertigo. There's a lot of new loot. You can take a look at it while I'm scrolling up the screen here, but as you can see, there's a lot to take a look at. And some pretty cool things here as well. So we really do want to encourage everyone to go check out the Lamania public preview server and get us that feedback. The transfers are working pretty good last I checked. Seems to have gone well yesterday in terms of people copying characters over. So you should be able to get your end-of-game character, as it were, over fairly easily onto Lamania here and give it a shot if you'd like. So. And yeah, you can just see we've got lots of things. And I'm going to save the Scroll Seal Shard talk, I guess, for next week. So
yeah,
what do we got for any kind of questions here before we wrap things up? Oh, I will check the weekend bonus here before I call it. Any plans to remove or modify Epic Ward?
We're talking about it. Specifically, I know there's a lot of people interested in ability score damage. Part of the reason that was there in the first place is because around the time of Mo2, it was very easy to just get weapons that could do ability score damage on hit any given enemy 4 to 10 times, and it would be helpless pretty much forever. And we don't want to land in a situation again where the best strategy is to bypass most defenses and just render something helpless in a couple of hits. Mm-hmm. So it's something we're talking about. We might be able to ease it without removing it. Hard to say.
All right. I don't know if I can easily call up a bullywug when I can get it to dance. Let's see.
I feel like there's one around the dojo, if I'm not mistaken. I thought Torque put one in here near where you could pick up the higher leg. I don't know where, though.
Yeah.
Haven't been in here in a minute.
Yeah, not in the kobolds. They're not with the kobolds. All right. Well, I hear it's pretty good too. I hear we've got a pretty good bullywug too, but I'll have to check that out. I've not actually seen the dance yet myself. I've been too busy. So, oh, hey, this one we could talk about. What about a legendary epic Sword of Shadow?
Oh, sure. When we were talking about the legendary versions of a lot of the old epic items in the Scroll Seal Shard system, we talked a lot about Sword of Shadows, and it's one of those items where if we gave it the kind of statistical power in crit that it has as a level 30 endgame weapon, it would clearly be better than everything else that exists, and it would remain that way for an extremely long time. If we created a version of that item that didn't quite have that power, it wouldn't be very appealing because that's the appeal of that item. So the route that we've kind of chosen to go with it is we're going to create a cosmetic Sword of Shadow that is unique and new, and that dance, it really is good, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of just sort of dragged whatever you were talking about to a halt, didn't it?
My
I'm
whole train of
sorry.
thought is
Yeah.
straight out the window. That
Yep.
Bullywug dance is fantastic. As I was saying, we decided to let you be able to upgrade the epic Sword of Shadow to a cosmetic one that is going to look new and cool, but we don't want the kind of meta disrupting power that a statistically extremely strong legendary Sword of Shadow would bring, but we also don't want to create a lesser version either just to have it.
We could also maybe quickly mention a little bit, tagging on to last week's conversation, that we have done some changes related, to feedback on Epic Destinies and all that. I know you've been also heavy into the Epic Destiny stuff here. So, is there
Yes.
anything you want to kind of let people know in particular about some of the work for Epic Destinies that you've done over in the past week?
Honestly, I haven't gotten to too much of direct changes in trees yet, because I've been trying to get Horizon Walker ready for this preview. It's the unfortunate problem of having these previews back to back, is I had to get stuff ready for one and had to get stuff ready for the other. We did put out a list of things to the system that we're looking into. We need to finalize a few of those before I get into specific tree changes.
Sure, and I was actually trying to call up that thread right now. I'm running into an issue, but there we go.
There's definitely some good feedback I got on the trees that I worked on, and I want to integrate that, but I'm holding off on making specific commitments to tree changes until we've finalized some of the systematic changes.
Cool. You see anything in Twitch chat maybe you want to address here before we call it?
Let me take a look up.
All right, here we go. So, some of the Epic Destiny feats are going to get some work, we can say that. We have spent some time revamping lesser used options to make them tie better into the trees. We'll have more about that as we get, closer to this happening. And again, not update 50, but beyond that, update 51 most likely. We're going to look at returning a few of the abilities, perhaps. Maybe the Tsunami spell, joining the Druid spellbook rather than being removed. We've received a lot of feedback about what players want to see in Tier 5, and we'll be taking a look at some of that. Again, we referenced monster and content difficulty. We've already talked a ton about that today, but that also plays into this Epic Destiny revamp clearly as well. Range power, it looks like we need more range power a little bit. It sounds like we're perhaps moving away from the concept of the builder spender charge system. Not that we won't necessarily use it at all, but it looks like maybe it's something we're talking about at least, right?
Yeah, within the team, we're looking into, is there a way that we can make that system feel good and address some of the concerns that people had with it? And if not, what would a system look like where we didn't have that, but still can keep some of the things from it that we feel are necessary for balance? So it's something we're working on. But again, like this week, we're very focused on update 50. So the timeline on getting exact changes and a plan on what we're doing with that is going to be longer than it would be for other updates.
Someone is asking about incorporeality in Horizon Walker. You don't see it; the player does. There is a displacement ability in there as well. I've
Right.
seen.
I feel there was more incorporeality in an older revision of it. It didn't quite make it forward. It might make it back. I'm already working on some revisions to the tree. So
Yeah, but I definitely did see that there's a displacement effect in that tree currently.
yeah.
All right. I think we're going to wrap it up. Thanks very much, Seal
All
Star,
right.
for joining me. I really appreciate you taking some time out of your day here today for us.
Welcome. It was fun.
All right, and thanks everyone for watching. I'll be back next Wednesday with more. Maybe we'll look at Shard Seal Scrolls. Maybe we'll look at something else. We'll kind of have to see what the will of the people is here for next week's weekly Wednesday lunchtime live stream. Love that you're here. You can watch the show on Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, either live or afterwards, and I really appreciate you playing Dungeons & Dragons online. Let me get to that bonus real quick. Before I promised. Yep, let me do this. I have to call up the tree here, or call up the Excel page. Check the date. Yep, we've got a 5% XP Reaper boost happening, kicking off late tomorrow morning Eastern time, running through Sunday. On top of that, we're going to be doing an XP, a boost for VIPs. They're going to get plus 15% VIP XP, and that looks like that's going to run for about a week. So we'll have more information on that tomorrow morning when it goes live, but a Reaper XP boost along with an extra VIP XP boost. So good time to be playing here through the weekend. All right, thanks everyone. Talk to you again soon.
Bye.